Welcome to Tea Talks, where young adult stories and church experience blend into a beautiful insight to inspire us. So grab a cup of tea, sit, relax, and enjoy while we spill the tea. I have with me here today a new friend, Joshua. Joshua, thank you so much for accepting the invitation to be part of this new video series. I am so happy that you're here.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the invite, Pastor Chris. It really is an honor and a privilege to be here and be a part of the experience to help expand ideas around church and Christianity and those types of things.
That's awesome. Well, why don't we start with you telling us a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're from?
Originally born and raised in South Carolina, was part of a church community my entire life there, and I really had a great opportunity in being able to grow up in a community that was close-knit, that was very Southern in its way of being as far as the Southern charm. It's a real thing. So I grew up in a community where being welcoming and being part of a bigger family was very important. And so now I have moved recently to North Carolina, enjoying it. Not vastly different, but definitely different. Different cultural ways of being, coming from a small town, now being in more of a city atmosphere. So it's been a good 30 years so far, and I'm having a good time.
That is awesome. When you talk about like the Southern charm, I'm from South America, from Brazil. So everything I'm learning as I go, and it took me a while to understand the South. You know, the Southern culture.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, I feel like the Brazilians, we're more like the New Yorkers, you know, like fast-paced, talk and direct.
Well, that might be the truth, but in my experience with Brazilians, you have a better attitude about things than I would say about New Yorkers.
I didn't live there, but yeah. But I love everything about cultures, different cultures. So when
Same.
I moved to North Carolina, it was, and Tennessee. I lived in Tennessee for a while too. So learning the different cultures, I'm fascinated about it. So I love it. And the small town feel, it's what we grow up watching in movies, you know. So I lived 20 years in Florida, and I play around that. I say I lived 20 years in Florida, then I moved to the United States, you know, because those were the different things that I started seeing, you know, when I actually moved out of Florida. So I loved it. Well, I think this is a good segue for the topic that I want to talk to you about it, because I think it's all about the South. How do you define the concept of best neighbors?
Being the best neighbor does have a lot to do with culture, but also understanding the concept of people within your own community might be from a different culture and therefore might see and do things a little bit differently. Being accepting of that, of where people come from, recognizing why they are the way that they are, and still loving them in a way that is accepting of them as an individual in the broader family of Christianity, is a way that you can be the best neighbor. The way I think about it is best described by what Jesus said in Luke chapter 10, which, talking about the Good Samaritan, he's talking to some of his Jewish brethren. And at the end of that parable, where the Samaritan, the outcast of the Jews, was the one who actually helped the individual that needed it and went above and beyond the calling of what was needed there, Jesus simply said, "Who was this man's neighbor?" And the Jewish man said, well, he couldn't even say the word Samaritan. He said the one who helped him, or something of that variation. That's what being the best neighbor is. Showing up to your community, looking past what cultural differences might be there, and having people be a part of your community as if they are your family.
We're talking about best neighbors because in this book, Growing Young, That's one of the characteristics that they found, that the churches that are thriving in attracting and keeping young adults, they are best neighbors. Young adults, when they see a church, they care for the community, care for the neighbors, they want to be part of it because that's where they find purpose, they find a meaning to their life. So that's why I wanted to talk to you about that. Have you witnessed, either in the church that you are now or church that you were before, have you ever witnessed or practiced this idea? So give me a specific, so how do you feel like a church looks like when they are being best neighbors?
I'll give a personal example. I have a friend of mine who his dad had gone through some difficulty in life, was actually incarcerated. And when he got out, he needed a place to live. At the time, I owned a home, and that home had an extra room. And so I was actually requested by my friend if I would open up my own home to this individual. And I went ahead and did it, knowing the risks, understanding that there was even a cultural difference between the person that I was letting in my home and myself. Sure, we had some commonalities. However, he came from a different background than what I did. This man was much older than I was. But I saw a need, and I wanted to be a part of positive change for this individual. There may not have been a better opportunity to witness to someone of that nature than to actually bring them into my own home. I make that distinction because the church is supposed to be our home. And if the church is supposed to be our home, inviting people of all backgrounds, of all cultures, the ones who have made big, huge, giant mistakes, which admittedly is very, very difficult for me sometimes, especially depending upon the type of mistake or the severity of that mistake that you have made. It can be hard to invite them in, but then realizing that these people are people, they're human beings that desire relationship, that desire love, and are seeking those things and probably filling their life with things that shouldn't be. They're filling a void that is Jesus-sized, and they're not filling it with Jesus. They're filling it with other aspects of culture and things around them. If we can be a part of showing them Jesus and bringing Jesus to them, they might be able to actually fill that void and put their life on a track that is much better than what it was or what it could be.
I'm listening to you, and I'm trying to put myself in your shoes, and I'm going to be honest with you. I would probably be afraid of bringing this person to my house. And you said you knew there were risks. What made you think, okay, there's a risk. I'm afraid that I don't know what this individual did, but I'm bringing this person to my house. What helped you overcome this fear of the risk or concerns? What made you say, let me bring this person fresh out of prison to my house?
Just like with anything, whether you're talking life in general, or maybe your investing portfolio, or driving down the road, you're going to mitigate risk. If I get in my car, I'm going to mitigate the risk of my life by putting on a seatbelt. I had a great relationship with this individual's son, and that relationship continues to this day, and my relationship with the individual that stayed with me continues to this day. But I had support from the get-go. In a church community, for example, you're bringing people into your home, and you're trying to witness and bring them into the fold and have them understand that they are wanted and needed, but you also have support behind you and beside you and in front of you. And that's what being part of a community is. I was able to look at his son and say, you got my back on this? And his son said, absolutely. I got your back on it. We will kind of play it by ear, but this is kind of what's needed. And if we can take this step, we can figure it out as we go. And sometimes that's how the church can operate too, if we decide to. It's difficult. It's difficult to bring people in that might change things or might change the way that we have to behave. but mitigating risk by understanding that you have people beside you, behind you, and in front of you to support you, and this new individual or individuals coming in, that is very, very key. And I think we do ourselves a disservice. Been recently studying the concept of prayer and how that is integral in your Christian walk. Fervent prayer is so necessary because what we're doing is actually ascending to the throne of God and asking Him for help to accomplish a task that might be difficult for us to accomplish on our own. So whether or not the human beings next to us and behind us are helping, we always can go to the throne in order to receive a spiritual help that is limitless.
You know what you made me think right now? The incredible risk that God took when He created free beings. You know, isn't it amazing how God gives us experiences that takes a risk just to show to us how much He loves us, and the risk that He took to create beings that could just choose not to love Him.
Yep.
You know?
Absolutely, absolutely. And the risk that He took in sending His Son to be a part of the community, to be integral in the culture, to be part of bringing people into the fold. That was a risk in and of itself. To think that Jesus came to the earth and there was no risk, that it was just automatic, that He was just going to do everything that He had to just because, there was risk there. There was absolutely risk there. So many different things, and you see it throughout Jesus' life. All the different times that people tried to take His life, all the different obstacles that were put in His way. So there's this constant idea of risk that has been taken even by God Himself, and understanding what the circumstances and outcomes could be, but also understanding that this is the best way to move forward.
Do you feel like this experience of being a good neighbor, of helping somebody, did that change anything in you?
Absolutely. Life is not about you, the individual. I can't expect for the world to revolve around Josh. I can't expect for everything to go my way. And when you put yourself out in a way that you have to bring somebody else into your world, it's no longer just about you. I have this saying, in every reaction or in every action or in every situation with other people, it's not about you, it's about me. Now that might sound selfish, but what that actually means is it's not about what Pastor Chris does in the relationship and how she reacts. It's about how I react, because guess who I have control over? Me, not Pastor Chris. So however you show up to the relationship, I can't control. But how I show up to the relationship, I can. And this applies to any situation, any relationship that you show up to and have to interact with human beings. You can control you, and you can't control anybody else. And that's what these types of situations help me realize.
What would you say, which kind of like it's obvious, but just get a little more into why is it important for young adults, for young people, to get involved and be best neighbors?
I would say this is the everyday practice of what Jesus did on this earth. He was so outward that He would neglect even Himself in order to help other people. And I think that that's so important, because Jesus had such a heart for individuals and for people that he would do anything for them. If you've participated in watching The Chosen, there's one episode, I think, in season 3, and Jesus is out there and he's healing everybody. And the whole episode just revolves around Jesus is out in this field and there's just lines and lines of people, and He's healing and helping and talking to and praying for all of these people. And all of the disciples are are going back and forth to the camp to eat and participate in these other things and play some games and all this kind of stuff, but they all start arguing about who's who and what's what and why. And the way that that episode ends is Jesus comes back, clearly exhausted from helping other people. And he looks at his disciples who are there arguing with each other, telling each other why each other have done the wrong thing. And Jesus says, I'm tired. Have a good night. And the first thing that he does is he gets in his little tent area and he starts praying. And it just, what that pictured for me, what that really grasped for me was Jesus' focus was not the wrongs of other people as much as it was the help that the other people needed. And that is so important. You want to be the best neighbor that you can be? Focus on what people need help with and not what they've done wrong. And I'm telling you, as a person who that's difficult to do sometimes, especially when people make mistakes under their own volition, under their own decisions, it can be hard to say, well, that's okay that you made the wrong decision. Let me just love you anyways, right? That's difficult sometimes. But that's not what we're called to do and be. I think Jesus shows throughout the Gospels that people are important, and helping those people overcome whatever it is that they have done to themselves or what has been done to them is so important to bring them into the fold and make them part of the community.
I love it. I think what you said is right on it. A lot of times we, instead of focusing, what can I do to help the situation? What can I do to help this person who is living a life that is not exactly the best life? What can I do to help this person? We focus on what they're doing wrong. I remember a time a while ago, several churches ago, that I noticed that they were willing to take money out of their budget to send money to people in Africa. But that sister that had a problem in our own community, well, she doesn't come to church every week, so I don't think we should help her. Like the mentality of, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's easy for me to help somebody far away because I don't know really their lives, but I'm judging the ones close by, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Have you encountered challenges when you try to be a good neighbor?
Absolutely. And sometimes you get burned when you play with fire. And that's what it can feel like when you step into these types of situations and scenarios. There were several ways, for example, in my own, to say that bringing this gentleman that I brought into my home was a cakewalk. It was not terrible, but there were instances that I had to deal with things that if he were not in my home, I would not have to have dealt with those. I don't know what it was in that situation and scenario because it is not the case always. But the amount of compassion that I was able to experience, and I say experience because I don't think it was coming from me, Josh, the individual. I think it really was the Spirit in me and Jesus really, really working on my own heart. Having to deal with those situation scenarios where his son was involved, for example. They were difficult for his son because his son has had to deal with that his entire life. For me, I'm kind of a third party, and I was able to be compassionate, and I was able to show that compassion not only to him, but also to his son. And that had impact. However, I've had other situations and scenarios where I've looked at it and said, this is the person's fault. They made this decision. They did this the wrong way. They should suffer the consequences. And I'm not one to let even my own self walk away from consequences because I feel that that's wrong. How can I get to a point where I can be more gracious to myself? Because it's going to be hard to be gracious to other people if I'm not gracious to my own self. And then when I'm extending that to other people, not being difficult towards them, being resentful towards them, being resentful towards the fact that Jesus has forgiven them, even though if they've done things that are 50 times worse than what I've ever done in my entire life. Getting there, the only answer that I know is a close, personal relationship with Jesus that is daily added to. Not weekly, not monthly, daily. And probably multiple times a day. If you and I, Pastor Chris, have a relationship and we talk once a week, that's pretty good, right? But if we talk every day, our relationship's going to be stronger. I'm going to know more about you. You're going to know more about me. The same applies with Jesus and the relationship that we're called to have with him, which is daily relationship. Just like you want to hang out with your best friend. I recently got married. I'm hanging out with my wife every day. Our relationship grows when we communicate with each other and we are with each other on a daily basis. And the same applies to Jesus. And that really, for me, is the answer towards how do I get better? How do I be more gracious to myself? How do I be more gracious to other people? And it's an actual relationship that is daily worked on with Jesus.
Amen. I have one last question. What can churches, leaders of the church, what can they do to help young people to be best neighbors?
Practice what they preach. And that's the same for us. If I'm going to be put in the realm of a young adult, I need to practice it too. I can't point my fingers at the old guys and say, hey, you need to practice this and you need to show me. I've got my own brain, my own capabilities, and I can also go and practice and learn these things. Which means then that instead of pointing my finger at the people who should be teaching me and who should have taught me, and where I come from, I got a lot of that. A lot of good representation of what a good neighbor is. And I'm very, very thankful for it. And today, being in a new community, I'm not going to be able to say there are some that do practice what they preach and they do a great job. And there are others who don't. And that's everywhere. Every church ever is going to have that. But instead of me pointing at them and saying, this is how you should do it, I'll just keep my fingers to myself and say, this is how I'm going to do it. And the way that I'm going to do it is practice my relationship and be intimate in my relationship with Jesus every day, so that way he's changing my own heart to help you, not even show you, but help you do it with me and make sure that they feel part of the same community that I'm trying to feel part of, so that way we can outreach to others and bring them into the fold.
Josh, this has been a wonderful conversation. I loved getting to know you a little better. Thank you so much for joining us. And
Absolutely.
I hope we can do this again.
Sure.
Soon.
Sure. Let's do it.
Yes,
Let's do it.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining Tea Talks. I want to ask you to keep stirring up the conversations. Embrace the beautiful and the messiness of life. And until next time.